everybody. Lance Russell and Dave Brown right along ringside. By golly, we're about ready to go with more big action.
Thank you very much, and welcome to Georgia Championship Wrestling. I'm Gordon Solie, your host, and we have quite an hour in store for us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Championship Wrestling at ringside. This is Vince McMahon, along with wrestling's only living legend, Bruno Sammartino.
Welcome to this week's edition of Mid-South Wrestling Television. I'm your host, Boyd Pierce, another outstanding card.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Regional Rasslin Podcast, where we talk the territories. I am Ray Russell, and this week going to be a fun time as we dive back into the late, great 1960s. My goodness, it's going to be a fun time, and in order to do that, going to bring Mr. Chicago himself back onto the program. It's been a few months here, but it's great to have you back. Mr. Richard Vicek, welcome back to Regional Rasslin, man.
Well, it's great to be here and talk about the Chicago Wrestling Club, which had a very interesting history from 1966 to 1983. I wanted to open with giving credit to two historians, George Shire of near St. Paul, Minnesota, and the late Ron Dobratz near Rockford, Illinois, that did a lot of the compilation of wrestling results from those years.
Okay.
And of course, George has the multiple books on the history of the AWA.
Correct.
Ron Dobratz had fanzines back in the day, newsletters.
Yeah, the old bulletins. You know, I almost got hanged one time. I called them fanzines, and I got a lot of backlash online. Some people don't prefer that term apparently. But it was great to see. Not until the internet days did I get to have access to these fanzines, these fan bulletins, if you will, and they're just phenomenal. They the fans really took it upon themselves to create these little circles of keeping wrestling going and keeping the territory era going, and they don't even realize what they're doing at the time. They're just sharing what's going on in their neck of the woods. But we get to go back, and there's so much history in them that we might not have had they not taken that step further than just getting the magazines, the After Mags and the Kitesers and things like that. So very cool. Definitely appreciate those for anybody who put those out there. I think everybody who contributed to those. I believe we both know a few people that were involved in those. We were just talking about Jamie Ward recently. I know Jamie loves to hear his name, so shout out to Jamie there. Another one of the many who put out these bulletins.
And I was invited to his house for a family dinner in 1985. He was still in high school. And then we all went over to see the WWF card at the Spectrum. I was passing through town.
Jamie had a very busy house.
Yeah.
Everybody from Dave Meltzer to Richard Vicek have stopped by Jamie Ward's house throughout those were the days, as they say.
Yeah, that was by then. I was starting to get interested in other territories and trading VHS tapes.
Yeah, Jamie put you over. You were one of the OG original. I don't know if you want to say you kind of turned him onto the tape trading world. Really, he said you were kind enough in the early goings to just send Jamie footage, and that got his taste buds going for all the different territories and things. So he really puts you over highly. And Richard, every time we have you on here, it's always a pleasure to have you. You're such a gentleman and a scholar and a true scholar here in the Chicago wrestling world. So what we're doing here this week, guys, is Richard took it upon himself. He's been doing going back in time and doing some deep diving into history he already knows, but he's doing even deeper diving, going back into his old programs and things he was just telling me off the air and kind of refreshing himself, just taking him back. And Richard, are the memories coming back even more now that you're diving back into the programs and things?
Oh, I'm doing new inquiry letters for some future years.
Okay, very cool.
Some loose ends I never followed up with. So you'll see about those new discoveries.
Well, I'm looking forward to that. So you hit on it. Basically, 1966 to 1983, the big Chicago territory was up and booming. What better way to kick it off? We're going to go back all the way to 1966. Richard's got a hell of an outline here, just looking at a lot of the big stuff that was taking place behind the scenes as well as in the ring at the time, Richard. So whenever you're ready, brother, we'll get rolling here into 1966, and we'll set the stage.
By the end of 1965, Fred Kohler was still the majority owner of the professional wrestling business in Chicago. Mm-hmm. He already had Dick the Bruiser and Wilbur Snyder as minority partners since mid-1964, and you could imagine Bruiser and Snyder were in every main event, sometimes both of them, but at least one of them. But now Kohler retired, and Verne Gagne was brought in as a partner. He joined forces with Bruiser and Snyder. And this was the first card. What we're going to talk about first is the first card after the merger, at least in Chicago, of the AWA and the WWA. Okay. AWA Verne, WWA Dick and Wilbur.
Right.
There were two frontmen, directors of the corporation called the Chicago Wrestling Club. The first was longtime wrestling photographer, publicist Bob Luce.
Jack of all trades.
Who had been associated with Bruiser and Snyder since the 1950s. And of course, Bob Luce for many years was an editor and publisher of Wrestling Life magazine, which was published out of the Marigold Arena offices.
Oh, okay.
On West Grace Street.
Right. I remember. I've seen the highlights from the Marigold. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other partner on paper was named Buddy Lee Clift. He was a Verne Gagne in-law.
Oh, what are those?
Buddy Lee Clift married a girl whose dad was Donald Markson. Markson was the maiden name of Mary Gagne, Verne's wife.
Ah, okay.
So I always thought, well, that's good. You have both factions representing the company on paper. Right. Because we can't have professional wrestlers owning the promotion company. No.
We can't have that for multiple reasons. Legal reasons, obviously, but, there were a lot of states. I don't know if people are aware that there were a lot of states that wouldn't allow that. You couldn't perform if you own the company. And so we would see that with the Sheik up in Detroit. We would see that with Luthez down when they were running opposition with Muchnick down there in St. Louis. A lot of guys would do that back in the day. Absolutely.
And in Indianapolis, Bruiser's wife, Snyder's wife, and Bruiser's mother were the officers of Championship Wrestling of Indiana, the WWA Corporation, So anyway, at starting off on this first year, one thing that Bob Luce always did was produce sensationalized program lineups. Okay. And I'm just going to hold something up here.
Oh, look at that. Congo Death Match. Oh, my. What does that entail? Do you remember what that entails, Richard?
Well, that was, the conditions were no pinfalls, no disqualification, no time limit. That was the main event of that card, the first card. It was WWA champ Dick the Bruiser versus Gene Kiniski, who had just beat Fez the previous night in St. Louis at the Kiel Auditorium.
Wow. Okay.
So the first match, Kiniski emerges victorious on this, and this is the only Chicago Wrestling Club card that had a sitting NWA champion. Wow. After this, all those other NWA champions never appeared in Chicago. And, I showed that program. A fan could subscribe by mail and get a 4-page printout, like a promotional piece, on the card and get it mailed to their house the week of the show.
Wow.
Yeah. And
before we continue on, too, I do want to mention, we forgot to mention the date of that event was
January 8th, 1966.
So right out of the gate, they merged at the brand new year, brand new promotion, if you will, here in Chicago.
At the International Amphitheater,
and a Congo death match.
Yes. That building operated from 1934 to 1999.
Okay.
Now, those programs, those wrestling programs from the International Amphitheater. Those are my prized possessions as far as a wrestling collectible. And I have 12 originals out of the 15 cards. And it's been years since I found any others. It just doesn't. But, that goes back to 1966. All three of the superstar owners were in main events on that card. Okay. And it's sad to report that for the entire 1966, there's only 2 still surviving wrestlers. They're all gone. The only still living were Eddie Sharkey and Larry Hennig.
Right.
How time flies, though. So we'll mention those guys later when they make their appearances. But also on the card, Johnny Valentine. It was a no contest against Wilbur Snyder, and Verne Gagne beat Chris Markoff on that debut card. This was the first time Verne was in Chicago after many, many years.
Right,
I know he was very busy starting up his AWA promotion starting in 1960. At the time of the Chicago debut, the AWA world champion was Maurice Mad Dog Vachon at the start here in Chicago. And he won that title, defeating the Crusher in Denver in November 1965.
Okay.
The debut card included the Assassins, which were Dick the Bruiser's assassins.
Okay.
This is whose names were Joe Tommaso and Guy Mitchell.
Right.
And of course, Guy Mitchell, over decades, you may know him as either the Stomper or Jerry Valiant or Madman Mitchell or Guy Heenan. He used John Steele Hill was his born name.
Okay. Yeah, he worked as the Stomper here in the Cleveland territory, I know. And then obviously I think a lot of people would remember him as Gentleman Jerry Valiant, the third Valiant brother that came in during the second run there in New York for the Valiants.
Mm-hmm.
So, he got around quite a bit.
Yes, these assassins it was not Jody Hamilton and Tom Renesto.
Right.
Of Atlanta and Florida and other places. Hey, on this card, the Crusher returned to Chicago after many years also. In fact, the program referred to him as a ruthless breed. Typical Bob Luce. And his opponent was longtime WWA enhancement talent, Kelvin Prince Pullins. So anyway, when living in Chicago during this time, on television, they showed both the AWA program, which was originated in Minneapolis, and then the Indianapolis WWA program. They were shown on a black and white program on WCIO TV channel 26. That station is still on the air. And it was shown on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday nights at 9 p.m. Now, sitting there, it was not. I didn't know as a fan where these shows came from, but that's just they kept it to themselves. On the AWA, the play-by-play was Roger Kent. The promotional interviews headed up by Marty O'Neill, and for Indianapolis, Chuck Marlowe, the longtime sportscaster, did both the play-by-play and the interviews. At this time now, we know that the WWA was their own independent promotion.
Right.
But in Chicago at the amphitheater or on television in Chicago, only the AWA title belts and the tag team belts were shown in Chicago.
Richard, let me ask you a question, just as a fan, hypothetical. I mean, just whatever you... How do you think they came to that agreement? Because Bruiser and Snyder, it seems like they would want to represent their own local territory as well. But do they just feel that AWA is the bigger deal here, and so we have to go with one or the other? And so, do you think they just kind of went along with it, or what do you think went on behind the scenes?
my interview years ago with Greg Gagne said, both the partners agreed that. And when you think of it, Gagne was buying the big Kohler share of the pie.
Right.
Which was, I've never seen stock certificates, but it's easy to presume that Holtwer had a significant majority.
Sure.
So that's my take on that. The Chicago Wrestling Club had an office in downtown Chicago at 19 North Clark. You could get tickets at Sears Roebuck stores
I miss
in
Sears.
the box office. Yes. And ticket prices were $5 ringside, $3.50 reserved, and $2 general admission.
Wow, and this is back in the 60s, you're talking $5 ringside.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a good chunk of change. I mean, Chicago's a bigger city, so I know money's, everything costs a little more there, but that's still a substantial chunk of change for...
I know. We did, the general admission. I was always in the second deck.
Gotcha. I mean, that's impressive, though. That's very impressive. It
Yeah.
shows you how much, wrestling was loved at that point in time in
Yes.
history of Chicago wrestling there.
Well, anyway, second card, January 22nd, 1966. Johnny Valentine was brought in to face Dick the Bruiser and ended in a no contest. Valentine had wrestled in Chicago in 1963, sometimes under the Jack Pfeffer regime.
Uh-huh.
So that was the first, that was a good guy, I think, to bring in the feud with Bruiser, a roughneck like Johnny
Certainly.
Valentine. Also on that card, the AWA heavyweight champion, Mad Dog Vachon, made his first appearance ever in Chicago. And of course, his era goes back to the 1948 Olympic Games in London, where Vachon, representing Canada as a wrestler, met Verne Gagne, representing the United States as a wrestler.
And that's where that friendship, I guess, was initially formed. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And think of it, how many times Mad Dog Vachon came in and out of the AWA.
Right.
All the way up to the end of up until late in the promotion. Now, at this time right now in the AWA tag champions were Pretty Boy Larry Hennig and Handsome Harley Race, who had defeated Crusher and Verne Gagne in July 1965 in Minneapolis. That night, on January 22nd, Hennig and Race made their debut as a team. Chicago wasn't new to Race because during the Jack Pfeffer period, Harley Race wrestled as Chuck Long. In fact, his picture is a very young Harley is pictured in some of the early Pfeffer programs.
Okay.
Chuck Long. And so those are the main things on January 26th. I don't think fans will be particularly interested if I recited the results of every single match on these cards. I think they'll enjoy the major themes and the major pushes. So that's what I was going to do.
Well, I do want to, everybody out there listening or watching right now, I want to, let us know if they're interested in hearing the history in regards to the results and things of that nature. Let us know. We can certainly change that up when we get to 1967. And all as you scroll along too, if there's a match that sticks out to me, I'll definitely name drop it in here and take a look at it. But I did notice so far we've seen Johnny Valentine on 2 cards, and so far Johnny Valentine taking 2 of the top dogs to no contest. The both owners, Snyder and Dick the Bruiser, to a pair of no contests there. So, but that's setting the stage for things to come.
Yes, the next card was February 5th, 1966. Main event, Dick the Bruiser versus Johnny Valentine. Bruiser victorious over Valentine. And, they had a lot of experience the prior year in Indianapolis, where they even staged a pull-apart with police officers on Indianapolis TV.
Phenomenal. Mm-hmm. That's how you sell those $5 tickets, Richard. That's how you do it.
Yes. When they showed that, and, Chuck Marlowe, the announcer, sort of lost control. What's going on here?
Do you know how privy the announcer, like Marlowe, would have been to an angle like this? Would this have been something that, kayfabe, even the announcer in regards to something like this? Or would this have been something where they would have...
Let's put it this way. He wasn't in on the plot.
Gotcha.
Like Sam Menaker was.
Gotcha.
Right. Sam Menaker was an actual employee of the wrestling championship wrestling of Indiana.
Right.
And Marlowe was an employee of the various TV stations that he worked.
Gotcha.
So that's my tape on that. And I had interviews with Chuck Marlowe, and he said when he was working for doing stuff for the Bruiser Snyder promotion or the Jim Barnett promotion, which was prior to Bruiser and Snyder.
Yes, yeah.
He was there to call the action.
Gotcha.
A different situation, Also on February 5th, Hennig and Race went to a no contest against Verne and Wilbur. Mad Dog defeated Pat O'Connor, who was frequently brought in. Also, Moose Cholak was on the card.
Moose.
Who beat Guy Mitchell, who, by the way, that night didn't wear his assassin's mask.
Evidently not.
That was Bruiser's tag team in Indianapolis.
Right,
but he could do. People didn't. I didn't figure it out. So anyway,
right. No, because that's a hell of a card when you look at it. We'll go back to Moose in a minute because he's an interesting individual. But you got Bruiser and Johnny Valentine. You got Hennig and Race versus Gagne and Snyder. You got Mad Dog Vachon versus Pat O'Connor. I mean, you're talking about stacking the box here with main event level matches. And then we go back to the Moose.
And look who was a Chicago native. His family owned a tavern on South, I think it was on Ewing Avenue in Chicago, called the Calumet Beach Club. And he was a mainstay here for decades. In fact, he had what I think became known as the Chicago accent.
Okay.
Just like the longtime Chicago mayor, where the words "dees, thems, and does" creep into his speech.
I've heard that before.
Yes. Yeah. Even on Saturday night, the Bears. That comedy routine exploited that Chicago stereotype to the T. Yeah. So anyway, the next card that turned out was on February 26, 1966. Now, we had these two promotions, each with their world champion. So I thought it was a great promotional angle to create interest in Chicago, where the AWA champion Mad Dog would face WWA champion Dick the Bruiser. And Mad Dog won this round one on a count out.
Okay.
They rematched Verne Gagne and Wilbur against Hennig and Race, where the good guys won via disqualification. Moose Cholak was on the card again, and Guy Mitchell came in. And there was an interesting wrestler. It's a mystery man, but he used during these months the ring name Huey Long. There's one picture of him. Maybe I'll post it on a board. Anyone know? Okay. But Huey Long in real life was a New Orleans politician, and governor.
Wow.
Yeah,
I had never heard that before.
But who? Yeah, a program mentioned. Oh, is he a relative of Huey Long or whatever?
Okay.
But so they on the next card was March 26th. They came back with the WWA versus AWA, and Mad Dog won via disqualification. And the program cried out, "Mad Dog, this time they'll carry out Bruiser." And of course, again, inconclusive. They'll get the people back. Also on that card, Verne Gagne and Wilbur Snyder beat the Assassins out of Indianapolis. And this was likely Bobby Heenan's first debut as a manager at the International Amphitheater.
Wow.
For sometime they had another short-lived manager. But anyway, they used a lot of the same people, Valentine over Bobby Markoff. Markoff had a career going back to the 1940s.
Right.
This may have been his last year, and he got a lot of jobs in Chicago towards the end. He lived on Chicago's north side and was a veteran of Kohler's jobs. And also on this card, big development, the Chicago Wrestling Club debut of Ernie Ladd.
Big cat.
Who was a football star at Grambling University, and he played in the 1960s on 3 AFL teams, Kansas City, San Diego, and Houston. He defeated Lee Hennig, that's Hennig, who was a mainstay on Sam Muchnick's cards in St. Louis. So that, sometimes you could bring somebody in who was associated with St. Louis. It was, a pretty good driving distance.
So they continue to tell the story here of Mad Dog and Dick the Bruiser, another non-finish, inconclusive, as you said. So we're continuing to tell that story to build it up to yet another fight there, I would have to imagine. And
yes, we'll be hitting that real soon.
It's fun seeing Ernie Ladd come to town. We see some other good stuff, the big tag team match in the semi-main, but I also caught a ladies match here, and Cora Combs, who was very legendary, especially in the Tennessee territory, and then things of that nature. Later on, Debbie Combs, her daughter, would compete for many years as well.
Yes,
so I just thought that was really fun to see them come through here. And Pat O'Connor in the mid card there, kind of working the Macho Man's daddy there, Angelo Poffo, scoring a win over Angelo. Angelo, who didn't get a lot of wins, he wasn't as successful as his son would be.
No, but he had a steady career, Poffo, and during these years, he was a full-time school teacher, elementary school teacher with the Chicago Public Schools. He kept his wrestling to Indianapolis and Chicago, basically, during these years. At this time, the Chicago Wrestling Club added a new ticket, a $1.75 ticket for children in the mezzanine.
Okay.
So that was published in the program. That leads us to the next card, April 16th, 1966, which was the first card I ever attended in person as a 9-year-old. My parents took me. I must have had a good report card.
Let me ask you another question, Richard. I'm sorry to keep going off the beaten path.
No, I want to hear what you want.
So I was talking to Kerry Silken quite a while ago when he used to go to Madison Square Garden. Up until a certain age, the Garden did not allow children. I think it was 13, 14 years old, something like that, up until a certain time period, I believe in the 70s maybe. But so I was just curious here, because now all of a sudden they've generated this area for children specifically. Was this a situation in Chicago, or did they not allow the children up to this point, or was this more to get the families to come out?
I think they were accommodating for this discount for children.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, and on April 16th, that was the first card I attended. Actually, got to say, "Hi, Bruiser," because he walked in through the lobby just before we went through the turnstiles with Pat O'Connor, his tag team partner.
Very cool.
But they lost versus on disqualification to Hennig and Race that night. The main event was Verne Gagne beating Johnny Valentine via disqualification. So that was the final match of the night was Verne.
Okay.
Also on that card, Chris Markoff, the former Yugoslavian bodybuilder, defeated Eddie Sharkey. Eddie Sharkey would get famous some years later as an early trainer of the Young Road Warriors team. So
he would train quite a few, but the Road Warriors were probably most likely the most famous of them all. Absolutely, yeah.
Also on this card, Angelo Poffo beat Joe Blanchard from San Antonio, Texas, who before this was a Canadian football player on the Edmonton Eskimos with teammates Wilbur Snyder and Gene Kiniski.
Wow.
And of course, we later know Joe Blanchard as being the father of Tully Blanchard.
Right. Joe would go on to promote down there in San Antonio for Southwest.
Yes.
His son would have much success throughout the 80s and whatnot as well. So, yeah, it's fun. I did not realize that he had played. I knew he had done the football up there. I didn't realize that they had all been on the same team at the same time.
Yeah, it was not a Grey Cup winner. They lost in the finals.
Okay.
But it was a very top football team. I know Minnesota Vikings and Buffalo Bills have lost 4 Super Bowls, but they were great teams to get to that match.
Absolutely.
To get to those levels so many times. The final guy I want to talk about on this first card I attended at the amphitheater, his ring name was Ivan Volkoff. Now, in real life, he was WWA enhancement talent Bill Fraser, who worked full-time as a United Auto Worker in Anderson and Indiana. When I interviewed him for the Bruiser book, he says, I was Ivan Volkoff in Chicago. And you know how that came about? The Russian team in Indianapolis, Boris and Nikolai Volkoff, that's not the WWF guy.
Right.
They were complaining to Bruiser in the locker room in front of everybody about their payoffs. And after Bruiser heard that back talk, he yelled across the room to me. He says, Frazier, how long will it take you to grow a beard and become Ivan Volkoff?
Wow.
So he became a Russian in Chicago as punishment to the rabble-rousing Boris
and Nikolai. Yeah, the original Nikolai Volkoff. This is not the future, the one that would go on to the WWF and all the territories that the video footage exists. So there's a little bit of the Volkoffs out there, though, and they were a fun little tag team. But it's funny to see how simple it was. A lot of people think there's a lot of thought and effort put into everything that goes on behind the scenes, and sometimes it just takes pissing off the wrong guy.
Yeah, it is. Especially I'm sure they, those Volkoffs probably notice, hey, this Indianapolis promotion is improving now. We do some Coliseum shows, but I guess that was you take your chances when you confront the boss who controls the purse strings.
Relive the glory days of Memphis wrestling with the Retro Wrestling Review USWA podcast. Each week, we go back in time to review USWA Championship Wrestling from the 1990s, episode by episode. Join us for watch-alongs, behind-the-scenes stories, and exclusive interviews with people who were there and lived it. Whether you grew up watching it or you're discovering it for the first time, this podcast is your ringside seat to Memphis wrestling history. It's all a part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Listen now at USWApodcast.com.
Hey guys, Ray Russell back to talk to you about all the new and exciting audio and video podcasts we've been putting together over at patreon.com/WrestleCopia. As a self-funded brand, this entire ship is powered by our patrons. It's your support that keeps all of these wonderful shows going here at WrestleCopia. And with that said, I wanted to mention that we now have 3 major tiers with tons of Patreon-exclusive next-level content for our Patreon supporters. And it all starts with the $5 all-access tier, which gets you early access to many of the weekly podcasts, at least a dozen monthly digital downloads for your viewing and reading pleasure, the insanely detailed show notes for the Wrestling Memory Grenade Regional Rasslin, and the OG Monday Warfare podcast, plus random bonus video drops, archived old-school audio watch-alongs from the early years of the brand. And if that's not all, the brand new Patreon-exclusive podcast, Ranting Raw, featuring yours truly, Ray Russell, completely uncensored, unfiltered, with honest takes, taking patron questions and addressing various topics from throughout wrestling history. It is a whole lot of fun wrapped under the all-access tier for only $5, but things get even hotter with the VIP Superfan tier. For just a few dollars more, you get everything already mentioned in the all-access tier, plus as part of the VIP tier, a whole new slew of videocast series where it's not just your typical watch-alongs. Sure, we laugh, we have fun, but we're also breaking down the history, the context, and the why behind what you're seeing. And as part of the VIP tier, you have access to Dan Ginnety's Pro Resu Academy videocast, the Coliseum videocast with co-host Gene Jackson, and the Monday Warfare videocast, Raw vs. Nitro, breaking down the history of the Monday Night War. Plus, you also get the Memphis 1985 folder of goodies and all show notes for the Pro Academy podcast and Gene's retro review show. Lots to be had there at the VIP tier. But wait, there's more. For those WrestleCopia backers who crave even more from the brand, we bring you yet another level of content fit for a warrior, because it is indeed the ultimate tier, which gives you everything from the All Access Pass, everything from the VIP tier, plus you will receive access to the big ones video series featuring a lengthy look and discussion into some of the biggest pay-per-views, super shows, and other events from throughout wrestling history. It's also a great place to keep up with the big events that coincide with the Monday Warfare videocast and so many other big events from years gone by. You'll also have access to the newest big hit to the Copia brand. I'm talking about Regional Rasslin Unreal, the video series. Get ready for the next level in Regional Rasslin as we dissect territory history in video form. Watch along with us. But still, even more for your money, guys. You'll also receive access to the Treasure Chest, which offers patrons the unique opportunity to download and watch select rarities from wrestling history. And for those of you who are wondering what we offer, are contemplating joining a paid Patreon membership, or simply a curious lurker, a reminder there's a free tier at our Patreon that you can join as well. Remember, guys, no subscription, cancel any time, but I think you'll like the content that we're offering there for any budget you may have. And you can sign up right now, patreon.com/WrestleCopia, or look for the QR code where available. We appreciate your support in helping us pay the bills to keep the WrestleCopia Podcast Network running and enabling us to continue to bring you all of the quality programming that we offer.
Hey, it's Bob Smith, and guess what? The Outdated Wrestling Hour is now part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. But hey, no fear, you're still going to hear the unique guests, comedy, music, authors, journalists, funny people. Who knows who's going to end up on the Outdated Wrestling Hour? Remember, it's all new and all old. So check it out in the WrestleCopia Podcast Network and wherever you get your podcasts. Listen if you know what's good for you.
Hey, the next card now was May 21st, 1966 at the amphitheater. My whole family went to this, a nuclear family of 4, plus the nuclear family of 4 that lived next to us. There were 8 of us there that night.
Okay.
And this is the first time I saw a crimson mask in the ring.
Brother.
Because they staged another Congo death match.
Love this.
Bruiser against Mad Dog Vachon. And this was settled to score. Of course, the titles weren't on the line for this.
Right.
But the fans went home happy and, with Bruiser winning. And never again would the WWA title ever be mentioned.
Wow.
On TV or shown at the amphitheater. People tell me there was one TV taping, an interview segment where Van Raschke forgot to take off his belt. And it was videotaped for Chicago. But, I don't even know how many people would have caught on to that.
Right.
Also, interesting event on this May 21st card. You may remember the name Chris Tolis.
Sure.
The brother of John Tolis.
Right, yeah.
He was a one-hit wonder on Chicago. To set up this match, Chris Tolis interfered with Crusher after the Crusher's match on AWA TV and put a corkscrew hold on Crusher. It was like he'd get him around the neck and dig his knuckles into the temples,
that was a famous,
paralyzing the Crusher.
That was a Tolis hold. John would use that as well, yeah.
Okay.
You know, they gave that to Sergeant Slaughter in 1990, and Dave Meltzer and the crew had fun with it. You know, they would call it the Atomic Noogie and things like that. I'm telling you, Richard, I use this on some siblings, my brother, my cousins.
Oh, yeah,
that's a legit finishing hold if I ever saw one. I'm going to tell you right now.
Yeah, it is. Now, in fact, my sister would sneak up at me. She was 2 years younger and would do that to me.
Don't try this at home, folks.
No, yeah. The Assassins were brought back, and they defeated Moose Cholak and Wilbur.
Okay.
Wilbur had just returned from his first tour of Japan. It was almost 5 weeks, where he was a bad guy. And anyway, Bobby Heenan managed the Assassins, drew big heat. I was so impressed with how he drew booze and rolled up cups of paper cups, you know, because he gestured to the crowd, stuck his hands up in the air when he was introduced.
Right.
Of course, the bout ended with Snyder accidentally drop kicking Moose,
his own partner,
for the loss, who got pinned.
Okay.
Yes. Also on this card, for the first time, as the Destroyer. Now, Dick Beyer had been here in the 1950s as Dick Beyer.
Okay.
And when I was interviewing him from the Bruiser book, he used to tell me what he used to do with Bruiser hanging out. He says they would mix cans of V8 juice into their beer to get some nutritional value.
Well,
because beer just had some carbs, but you know, now with a can of V8 juice, you know, he gets 8 vitamins and minerals. Yeah,
always thinking.
Yeah. On this card, wrestler Sharon Lass beat Kathy O'Brien. Sharon Lass just passed away last year, and she was most famous for being the wife of promoter Bob Luce.
Ah, okay.
Yes, and she was also, by the time the 70s rolled in, the first female referee hired by the Illinois State Athletic Commission.
Very cool.
You know, she had one of those, referee shirts with the state of Illinois patch on it. But yeah, that was Sharon Luce was on that card. So before the next Chicago card, there was a big AWA title change on May 28th in Minneapolis, where Dick the Bruiser and the Crusher defeated Hennig and Race.
All right.
And throughout this presentation, I will insert when there was a title change in the AWA, because that could set up the next match in Chicago, with the title change. On June 24th, the main event was Wilbur Snyder against Mad Dog Vachon, which hadn't been done before, and the program cried out, "Thank you, Bob Luce. The greatest match in Chicago since Londos versus Strangler Lewis in 1934 at Wrigley." You know, Snyder was a great contender to build up Mad Dog Vachon here, because he hadn't previously wrestled in Chicago. Snyder, what I admire is he always did what was best for business, not his own ego.
We talked about that multiple times here on the show, and how Snyder was out there to do what was best, like you said, for business at the end of the day.
Yes,
he does quite a few more jobs than any of the other main event guys, that's for sure.
Yes, and the job was to increase that box office take, because he got a slice of the net income as a shareholder, the dividend off the card. And it looks like they paid dividends right off each card.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah, which, unlike in St. Louis, Sam Munchnick, did it quarterly. You know, if there was dividends out the door with them. Also on this card, Markoff beat Doug Gilbert. Ernie Ladd came back and beat the Alaskan, who had wrestled as Jay York and the Mask Avenger in Indianapolis in 1964.
Okay.
They brought the Destroyer back over Prince Poems, and a new addition to the lineup, Louis Martinez beat Ivan Volkoff, the Russian. Now, Martinez was very popular in Chicago, but he had two identities. First, he was Mexican, and then all of a sudden they used the moniker, or whatever you call it.
Moniker, yeah.
As he was a Native American, Apache Louie.
Apache Lou, that's it. Yeah, that's it. He was another big guy here in Cleveland and Detroit, so I'm familiar with him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. July 15th, Mad Dog Vachon defeated Ernie Ladd. I didn't realize at the time, but it was later said, well, you should have known he's not going to win a belt because he's going back to, this was a July card. He's getting ready for football training camp.
Oh, okay.
He doesn't have the schedule to carry a belt yet because of his football commitment. Also on this card, Bruiser and Crusher beat the Assassins, got Verne over Chris Markoff, and Wilbur Snyder against Angelo Poffo. They had wrestled hundreds of times since the mid-1950s. And their picture is on the cover of the biography of Wilbur Snyder, the world's most scientific wrestler. Plug.
Who put that book out, by the way, Richard?
Crowbar Press.
Crowbar Press. Written by?
Yeah. Stephen Verrier and myself.
Oh, Richard even putting himself second. What a gentleman.
It's alphabetical. Also on this card, the Alaskan came back and beat Johnny Case. I want to mention a little bit about Johnny Case.
Yes,
because he was a mainstay wrestler in Chicago. He was a college wrestler at the University of Marquette in the 1950s in Milwaukee. He was the son-in-law of the Landos era wrestler Jim McMillan, who that was one of the key opponents in the 1930s of Jim Landos, who is almost considered the king of that era, golden era.
Right.
But Case had a unique thing because he had a real job. He was a school superintendent in Antioch, Illinois. He actually earned a master's degree, and not too many wrestlers had a prestigious, important job like that in real life.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't think it, because this little squat, tubby, mid-card wrestler, but he's a school superintendent and for an elementary district, And of course, they brought back Louis Martinez and Drew Moose Cholak.
That would have been that's a contrast of styles all day.
Yeah.
Huh? For anybody who's seen those guys.
Yeah. Yeah, Moose is, very big, thick, clumsy, among other things.
You're being polite. But yes.
The next card was August 5th, 1966. And they started a legendary feud in Chicago that would come back in singles and tag matches. It was Mad Dog Vachon beating the Crusher on a third fall disqualification. They brought in the Alaska with his partner, Big K, Stan Kowalski of Minnesota. They actually beat Wilbur and Verne 2 out of 3 falls. A new addition to the card was Killer Kowalski. The Killer Kowalski, who beat Guy Mitchell. Kowalski came in for a 6-month stint in the AWA with Chicago stops. And of course, the program always mentioned the Yukon Eric accident earlier in the 1950s in Montreal, where there was a Kowalski leaping off the corner of the turnbuckles, and his knee landed on the side of Yukon Eric's head and tearing the ear off.
Tears the ear off. So he was, my understanding, he was Tarzan Kowalski up until that situation, and then they maneuvered over to Killer Kowalski, and he would live off of that, kind of like Ox Baker would live off the Heart Punch stories I feel like Kowalski was able, but
that
early Kowalski was a machine. If you can watch some of the early Kowalski footage that's out there, he was a real machine in the ring compared to the later stuff.
Mm-hmm. I see now the next card was August 26th, and they brought back the Crusher and challenging Mad Dog Vachon, more of the same carnage. And in this series, we're going to see the name Crusher versus Mad Dog very frequently.
Okay.
Of course, on this card, Gagne beat the Alaskan via disqualification. Wilbur beat Moose Cholak, which was, they were both good guys, but, those things happen. Kowalski, Louis Martinez were victorious.
Okay.
On this next card now, this was the first time that I remember, well, this is Bruiser and Crusher were brought back for the main event, defending their tag team championships against the Alaskan.
16th? I just want to make sure we're at September 16th.
September 16th. The program that they called out, Crusher made a quote, "Fans with weak hearts should stay away."
It just makes them want to come even more.
Thank you, Bob Luce. Big K was a mainstay and a former AWA tag team holder.
Uh-huh.
In the early 60s, a team called Murder Incorporated. Also, and of course, they brought back Killer Kowalski to build him up, winning over Pat O'Connor.
Wow.
Yes. A recent new addition to the Chicago was Mitsu Arakawa. He had appearances during the days of the Marigold Arena and the early TV show on the Dumont Network.
Mm-hmm.
And Mitsu was one of the most effective Japanese evil wrestler characters from the 50s to the 1970s. And he will rise to tag team fame with Dr. Moto. And we will cover that, too, in future episodes, because there was a time where Dr. Moto and Mitsu Arakawa held both the AWA and WWA tag titles simultaneously.
Okay.
So we'll get to that. They brought back the Destroyer against Jose Betancourt. And the program for that night had an ad where the Chicago Wrestling Club was selling Destroyer masks at the office. And of course, you may remember wrestling magazines. There were Destroyer T-shirts and cigarette lighters. I think he had to have been the first guy to really merchandise his stuff.
Market himself, absolutely. The first one I could think of. Somebody's going to point something out somewhere, but best I could tell, it was brilliant to sell the masks and things like that, to go back and look and see, and man, the kids could, have something of their own. I could see them in the backyard or in the living room or something, putting the mask on and putting a sheet around them. My dad used to put a sheet around him as a cape, I guess he told me, or something like that.
Yeah. Yes. Well, good. We're wrapping up the last three cards for the year. And October 21st, Dick the Bruiser over the Alaskan. Wilbur Snyder beat Kowalski via disqualification.
That's Killer Kowalski. We got two Kowalskis here now, so I just want to be clear.
Yes. And then Verne beat the Big K.
Stan Kowalski, correct.
Yes. Also, the Hennig and Race, no longer the champs, were on the card, defeating Doug Gilbert and Billy Red Cloud, who we'll see him again.
All right.
Mitsu and Chris Markoff won their matches there.
All right.
That brings us now to November 11th. The program headlines, Positively, No TV. AWA champion Mad Dog Vachon beat Wilbur Snyder. Hennig and Race over the Big K and the Alaskan. And Killer Kowalski over newcomer to Chicago, Jack Lanza. Lanza was an ex-school teacher and a Verne Gagne trainee and referee. He made his Chicago debut. They put him against Kowalski, a big name,
Right.
This wouldn't be the last time we see Jack Lanza.
No.
Also on the card, Verne Gagne beat the Assassin. Presumably it was number 1. Pat O'Connor beat George Gadaski, who was a long-time AWA jobber and ring guy.
Mm-hmm.
And Chris Markoff won his match. At this point, the Chicago Wrestling Club closed its office at 19 North Clark in downtown. I'm sure they didn't need an office in the downtown business district, and they just opened a P.O. box for all the mail orders.
Probably saved a lot of money on rent that way, Richard.
Yes. Oh, yeah, in downtown Chicago.
Exactly.
That was in the Loop, in the high rent district.
Yeah, yeah.
And the final card of the year was December 16th, 1966. Larry Hennig and Harley Race defeated champions Bruiser and Crusher via disqualification, so the belts wouldn't change. Okay. Hennig and Race versus Bruiser and Crusher would have 7 matches in Chicago during these years. And there's no doubt that was the best tag team feud in the 1960s. Mm-hmm. In Harley Race's own autobiography, he was critical of Bruiser's technical wrestling skills. Yeah. Those guys were brawlers, and it is no doubt that Hennig and Race were the better technical wrestlers. But I remember Race saying Bruiser learned his technical skills from a Cracker Jack box. That's right in his own book.
Well,
Bruiser and Crusher now would call, in their interviews, Hennig and Race the Dolly Sisters, which is a 1945 film about identical twin singers in the big band era.
Okay.
Yes. On the 16th of December, Killer Kowalski beat Verne on disqualification. Snyder over Mitsu. Markoff again beat Jack Lanza, but he's going against really good people. Reggie Parks made an appearance, and of course, Parks was known for his great physique and making championship belts by hand for many decades. So in the program that night, Bob Luce thanked the fans for the first anniversary of the Chicago Wrestling Club, which he called memorable, exciting, and successful, which it certainly was.
It sounds like it. I mean, you're talking all the way down the card, really. I mean, even in your undercard matches, you've got at least one big name. And,
Doug Gilbert on an opening match.
Right. That's Gas House Gilbert for anybody curious. No relation to Tommy Gilbert and his family, but Gas House Gilbert at the time was, or he would go on to be Gas House Gilbert anyway, but he was a very solid performer in the ring. And I notice here on this December 16th card, you have Doug Gilbert in the opener over Igor Volkoff. So we talked Nikolai and Boris. Then when we talked Ivan, is this a different Volkoff yet again here, Igor Volkoff?
I really couldn't tell you,
Okay. Very good.
We don't have printed newspaper results. Chicago did not run ads every night before the card.
Oh, okay.
It was very spotty. This was done by these historians that track these. Sometimes there'd be a little half-inch box with wrestling results that somebody had phoned in.
Yeah.
This was totally different the way Fred Kohler did it, where you had a narrative paragraph promoting the card and the results the day or two afterwards.
Wow.
So you see, the internet peppered with ads from various territories. Right. AWA, WWA, Mid-Atlantic, WWF.
Right.
We didn't have ads here. Of course, they thought of that mailing program thing. Well, that probably cost them, if they sent out a few thousand every month. They were gradually building better and bigger houses, and When we get into 1967, we will actually have the first 2 sellouts at the International Amphitheater for the Chicago Wrestling Club.
Very good. Looking forward to that. Let me ask you another question real quick before we wrap this up here. So we saw Richard's very first time in the amphitheater there. Did you attend any other shows here in 1966, or was that your only one?
Just those 2.
Okay, those 2.
Just April 16th and May 21st.
April and May. Very cool. That's also, you saw your first Crimson Mask. It's likely to say probably not your last, though.
Yes.
Well, many more of those to come. And I'm looking forward to talking about 67 with you, man.
Yes. And there's a lot of new people coming in and developments. And as usual, though, we will let you know when there's a AWA title change.
Okay.
And we will also note when there's new personnel in Chicago that transferred over, that were sent up from Indianapolis, so that Bruiser and Snyder can give their guys a decent payday, because the Chicago payday most of the time was much more than a card at the Indianapolis North Side Armory.
Right. So we covered a lot of ground here just covering this first year of 66, the new world of Chicago without Fred Kohler, the political balancing act between the AWA and the WWA early on, the big feud, the defining feud really that gets everything off the ground was the Crusher and Mad Dog Vachon. Bruiser and Crusher begins to team here. We know that they're a hell of a team, so I don't have to talk a whole lot about that right now. But heavy use, and we see this in all the territories, of disqualifications and no contests to further along the story so that we could bring it back next month. Gradual introduction here, too, it looks like, of some new stars, new talent coming in. Jack Lanza, Ernie Ladd, guys like that. Killer Kowalski's not a new star, but for Chicago, it's fun to see him here. So the business infrastructure clearly expanding, it would appear, moving into 67.
And there, you'll hear those mention Ladd and Lanza. They will be back in main events for many years.
Yes,
years later.
I'm also looking forward to hearing about a guy by the name of Bobby Heenan, see what he does in the future here as well as we continue to break this down.
Yeah.
But,
and by now in 1966 in Indianapolis, he already had his first match as a wrestler.
Okay.
Against Kelvin Prince Pullins.
Prince Pullins, all right. I did not know that.
That was his first match at the North Side Armory, and Heenan talked about it in his first book.
Okay.
In fact, you will see the importance of Bobby Heenan in Chicago, because his stable provided much of the leading opposition to the good guys.
Okay, well, that would make sense. He is the brain after. Well, he's not the brain yet.
Well, thanks for having me on today to talk about the Chicago Wrestling Club,
Absolutely.
1966.
Thank you so much, Richard. We appreciate you being here. We're looking forward to being back soon with 1967, guys. More regional wrestling right around the corner. We've got a lot of great things coming up here, but thank you, Richard, for being there.
Yes, and I'll send you an outline for 67.
Sounds great, guys. We'll be back soon. More regional wrestling on the way.
Very good.